How does a revolutionary aircraft, one that promised to change aviation forever, lose its edge in less than a decade? Boeing's 787-8 Dreamliner was supposed to be untouchable, a technological marvel that fused carbon fiber composites, futuristic design, and unmatched fuel efficiency. It was the jet that made headlines, drew record orders before its first flight, and symbolized Boeing's comeback after years of stagnation. Yet today, the same Dreamliner that once represented the future now lingers in the shadow of its competitors, even within its own family. So what went wrong? How did a masterpiece of engineering become a cautionary tale of missed timing, internal rivalry, and brutal market shifts? This is the untold story of how Boeing's biggest leap forward turned into one of its most expensive lessons. When the Boeing 787-8 first rolled onto the runway, it wasn't just another airplane, it was a symbol of rebirth. Boeing called it the Dreamliner for a reason, a jet that could fly farther, burn less fuel, and connect cities that had never been linked non-stop before. Built mostly from carbon composites instead of aluminum, it was lighter, quieter, and far more efficient than anything in the sky. Airlines lined up to get their hand on it, with hundreds of orders pouring in before the first test flight even lifted off. Japan's ANA became the proud launch customer, turning the 787 into a national sensation. For Boeing, it was a moonshot that worked, at least at first. But in the shadows, Airbus was quietly watching, preparing a move that would challenge Boeing's dominance in ways nobody expected. While Boeing was celebrating its Dreamliner revolution, Airbus was methodically developing its counterpunch, the A350-900. It arrived a few years later with the same promise of long range and fuel savings, but executed with a bigger cabin, greater range, and more passenger capacity. The difference was subtle on paper, but massive in the real world. The A350 carried over 60 more passengers and could fly roughly 1,200 nautical miles farther than the 787-8. Airlines loved it because it offered more revenue potential with nearly identical operating costs. As the A350 fleet grew, something remarkable happened. Boeing's once unbeatable 787-8 started to look small, limited, and expensive to operate. The Dreamliner had launched a new era, but Airbus was the one mastering it. Yet Boeing's biggest challenge wasn't Airbus. It was something far more dangerous: competition from within its own house. In 2010, Delta Airlines inherited something unusual after merging with Northwest. 18 Boeing 787-8 orders it never wanted. After years of analysis and deferrals, Delta finally made a move that stunned the industry. It cancelled every single Dreamliner order. Instead, Delta chose to build a wide-body fleet around Airbus jets, the A350-900 for long routes and the A330neo for mid-range operations. For a US carrier to turn its back on a Boeing product, this iconic was nothing short of a corporate earthquake. Delta's reasoning was cold and precise. Why operate a small subfleet with higher maintenance costs and limited flexibility when Airbus offered superior efficiency and commonality? Boeing didn't just lose an order, it lost credibility. That decision signaled to the entire aviation world that even loyal American airlines were willing to bet on Airbus if it meant better economics. And Boeing's troubles were only beginning. Ironically, the 787-8's biggest rival wasn't built in Toulouse. It was built in Seattle. The 787-9, a stretched version of the Dreamliner, offered more seats, more range, and only marginally higher costs. For airlines, the math was irresistible: 50 extra passengers with nearly identical fuel burn. Within a few years, the 787-9 completely overtook its smaller sibling in popularity, leaving the original Dreamliner to fade quietly into irrelevance. United Airlines, once one of the 787's loudest champions, focused almost entirely on the 787-9 for its transcontinental and international routes. Boeing had created an internal war that it couldn't win. The company's engineering brilliance had outpaced its own strategy, and the aircraft that launched a revolution suddenly found itself obsolete within its own bloodline. But the worst blow was still to come, and it came wrapped in smoke. In early 2013, the aviation world watched in disbelief as a Japan Airlines 787 caught fire on the tarmac in Boston. The cause? A lithium-ion battery meltdown deep inside its electrical bay. Within days, every Dreamliner in the world was grounded. For 3 months, Boeing engineers scrambled to contain what became the biggest public relations disaster in modern aerospace history. During that time, Airbus pushed full speed ahead with its A350 program, learning from Boeing's mistakes without paying the price. Meanwhile, early batches of the 787-8, nicknamed the Terrible Teens, suffered from weight problems, design inconsistencies, and production defects so severe that some planes were never delivered. The damage was done, not just to Boeing's bottom line, but to its reputation. Even after the Dreamliner fleet returned to the skies, airlines remembered the chaos. And in aviation, memory lasts longer than innovation. When the A350-900 finally entered service with Qatar Airways in 2015, it was everything the Dreamliner had promised to be, without the drama. Reliable, efficient, and instantly profitable, it became the benchmark for long-haul operations. Airlines like Singapore, Lufthansa, and Cathay Pacific lined up to make it their flagship. The A350 didn't just compete, it redefined the standard. Boeing's 787-8, once a marvel, began to feel like a prototype that had outlived its purpose. Even as Boeing improved the aircraft and reached 99% dispatch reliability, the perception gap never closed. Airbus had used Boeing's growing pains as a roadmap to perfection. For every lesson Boeing learned, Airbus capitalized. Timing, once Boeing's greatest advantage, now worked entirely in Airbus's favor. And as the skies evolved, a new kind of rival was rising from below. Just as Boeing tried to recover its footing, Airbus changed the rules again, with the A321XLR. This narrow-body jet could fly routes once reserved for wide-bodies, but at a fraction of the cost. Suddenly, airlines no longer needed a medium-sized Dreamliner for thinner transatlantic routes. They could fly single-aisle jets instead. The very market the 787-8 was built to dominate simply disappeared. United, American, and other major carriers pivoted to smaller, more flexible aircraft that could adapt it to demand faster and operate cheaper. Boeing's original vision, aimed in a jet that balanced range, capacity, and efficiency, had been replaced by an era of specialization. The Dreamliner was designed for a world that no longer existed. In chasing every market, Boeing ended up fitting none. And while the rest of the aviation world moved forward, the 787-8 stood still, a relic of a vanished strategy. The story of the 787-88 Dreamliner isn't just about a failed aircraft, it's about how innovation without focus can destroy even the most advanced designs. Boeing's masterpiece became a victim of its own ambition, overtaken by its larger siblings, undermined by Airbus's timing, and outflanked by a new generation of flexible, smaller jets. It remains a technological triumph, but strategically, it's an expensive reminder that being first means nothing if you can't stay ahead. And as Airbus continues to dominate with the A350 and A321XLR, Boeing now faces a critical question. Can it adapt fast enough to win back the skies it once ruled? Aviation's future will answer that, but one thing's for sure, this story is far from over. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on Boeing's next move. Your engagement helps us create more deep dive aviation stories just like this one. So stay tuned because the next chapter of this rivalry is already taking off.